Elon Musk continues to antagonize OpenAI, a company he once co-founded. The world's richest man, along with a group of investors, offering $97.4 billion for the ChatGPT maker, just one of many major developments in the AI space that are really transforming business globally. William Falcon is the CEO of Lightning.ai, and he joins us now to talk about all of this. So good to see you. Thanks for being here. OpenAI CEO Sam Altman literally dismissed the offer out of hand, although it's not his decision to make. It really is the board. What's going on here between Elon and Sam Altman?
So, OpenAI has not been publicly priced yet. And I think what Elon is trying to do is figure out, what is the market value for that, right? And if he were not to do that, then Sam could take the company and basically buy it for nothing. Now that he owns both part of the public and the private company, then he's basically selling it to himself for half the cost. So it's a bit of a hack, I guess.
So essentially, Elon Musk wants to drive the price up and perhaps slow down OpenAI's progress. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, it's just like any publicly traded stock. If there are no bids, you don't know what it's worth. You need a bid. And if you're the one bidding and it's your own stock, you can bid it as low as you want.
This guy makes a lot of sense. I really appreciate you being here. Let's talk about the other biggest story in the AI space, which is DeepSeek, which rattled the entire industry, the markets, because in particular, they say it was developed with just $6 million in cost compared to tens of billions of dollars for most. Why do we take everything at face value in that process?
I think we want to see these meteoric events where things just happen that we believe are possible. 6 million is possible. We don't know that though, right? It's not the first time in AI that a small team has done something crazy. It happened twice, right? It happened with Alex when he built the first neural network on GPUs that beat 80 years of computer research. He was a PhD student at the time. And it happened again with ChatGPT when they took models from Google, transformers, and then they scaled them on GPUs. So it's not that it's not going to happen again. The question is this the time that it happened, right? But we can't validate the $6 million claim without seeing the training process and the data that it was trained on.
These are the questions I've been wondering from the very beginning. How do you trust someone who repeatedly lies about everything related to their economy, who's involved with forced technology transfers and intellectual property theft, to name a few? If it is true, if it was developed on just $6 million, what does it mean for the competition, and what does it mean for one of the world's most valuable companies, NVIDIA?
It doesn't mean that GPUs are going away. There's a trade-off between training GPUs, how many of those are available, so how many GPUs are being used to train models, right? Yeah. If you believe that you needed $10 billion to train a single model, you need more GPUs. If you now believe that you only need $6 million to train a model, you would say, I need fewer GPUs now. And everyone who's spending $10 billion needs fewer GPUs. That may be true to some extent if that claim holds. However, that's only half the story. The second is, what do you do with the model once it's trained? And that's inference and deployment, right? So you could say, okay, the model's been trained, now let's go take all the other GPUs and deploy models with them, because now it's more accessible to more people. I think the answer is both. It's just there's a supply and demand balance there. There will be a point where the supply for training is more than the inference demand, and so that will balance out at some point.
Was there an overreaction, broadly speaking?
I mean, the market dipped 4.5% that day. I think so.
It's good to hear that. So on the other hand, there's the issue of data collection. It is, of course, a China-based app, DeepSeek. Congress determined that TikTok bipartisan, nothing is bipartisan anymore. A bipartisan majority of Congress agreed that TikTok was a national security threat. Why should we not be worried, or should we be worried about DeepSeek?
Yeah, it's sensitive. I think we should be to some extent.
Yeah.
So a model is only as good as the data that it's trained on. It's a reflection of the data. It's like compressing the internet. So ChatGPT, took the whole internet and basically put it into a model, right? We don't know what that data was, but we believe that they acted in good faith, generally. China, we don't know what that data was. They could have taken history books and rewritten them. They could have taken culture and put them in there, things that they want. And so when a company uses a model to build a product, like Character AI, for example, and we had that big thing where people are falling in love with these, with these characters that are fake. Well, what if that character is now trained on data culturally in a way that China wants you to behave as a society, right? Now everyone is following these startups and these models, and then they're behaving in a way that China's oh, this is how you should do it. Maybe they become, I don't know, racist or sexist or whatever, things that we don't agree with. simply because it's a reflection of the data. The model itself is not bad, it's the data that's the problem. And they didn't open source the data, so we don't know what they did with the data.
A great point. OpenAI, all things AI. We're at the center of a summit in Paris this week. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, said he believes excessive regulation could ruin AI. Some believe there's not enough regulation in AI. Where's the truth?
So if you look back at history, every time there's been new technology, it's better to leave it unregulated for a while until it matures, right? And then at that point, you figure out what is kind of breaking and you regulate it. I mean, Elon Musk does this all the time. He'll launch rockets and do a bunch of stuff that's not regulated until it becomes regulated. So I think there's truth to that. I would say that it is a bit sad that Europe has regulated a lot, but I don't think it's that crazy. It's just Europe is older than we are as America, and it's kind of comparing like IBM to a startup. Like a startup doesn't have a lot of rules; they just move fast. Yeah. So U.S. is like a startup. Europe has been around forever. They have a lot of regulation. Just like IBM, if they wanted to compete with the startup, they have to take all of that and figure out how to get out of that and allow innovation to happen. So they're going through that process. It's just a natural rhythm in the world, and in 1,000 years, the U.S. will be going through the same thing at some point.
Yeah, it's a huge dichotomy. I mean, there's probably too much regulation in Europe, and there's absolutely none here in the United States. So somewhere in the middle, like most things, is probably where the answer lies. For most of our audience that is still trying to figure out what AI means to them, what's the best practical application, do you think? Is it as a search engine? Is that a resume writer?
So
How do you view it?
I think it's a way to augment people. So the best people that are going to be the most, lethal in the workforce going forward are people who learn how to use AI with their work. So let's say it's early 2000s and you haven't learned how to use a computer. How far behind are you from a job perspective, right? So if you haven't learned how to use AI beyond just summarizing things, I'll give you an example.
Yeah.
We use AI to, user tests. Pretend you're this person. Tell me if you saw this, what would you think? Pretend that you're reading my email and you're the CEO, what would you think instead? What if you're a developer instead? So you can do all these kind of role-playing activities. And so it's about the creativity of how you use the tool, not necessarily the tool itself. So the best people are going to be the ones who are the most creative at using the tools.
So your advice is no matter what profession you're in, figure out how AI applies to it and how you can take advantage of it, no matter what
100%.
you do.
Yeah, if you're in marketing, go grab your Google Ads, screenshot the thing, drop it into ChatGPT and say, how can I improve my ad performance? Oh, you got to put an ad about this or this or that. Great. I don't know, if I'm looking at in finance and I want to do analysis, then say, okay, look, if I wanted this thesis to play out, what would have to be true in this other thing unrelated to it? So if we go beyond please check my email and my grammar, then I think people will be, a little bit more supercharged. And those are going to be the 10Xers who are going to be the ones taking all the jobs.
Yeah, I often put in a story into ChatGPT and just see what they would find interesting and notable and pulls out.
Exactly.
And I think we should all, that's really good advice. So I want to figure out, without telling your entire life story, how one goes from Navy SEAL training to AI CEO.
I call it random walk, right? So I think one thing you learn in SEAL training is to kind of just push through no matter what the problem is, right? And I think Hell Week and everything else teaches you this. So when I came out of the military, my mentality was really more hey, I don't really have anything that can block me, right? You go through so much stuff that everything seems pretty easy. So when I left, and I had to kind of figure out what to do next, I got into computer science and math. I never wrote a line of code before that. I was terrible at math in high school, and then I ended up doing an undergrad at Columbia in computer science and math. Because coming out of something like Hell Week and SEAL training, I'm okay, I'm dry, I'm not cold, I can read a book and learn that thing, and all I have to do is just put my mind to doing that, right? And it sounds silly, everyone talks about that.
It doesn't, it actually sounds inspiring.
Right, and so startups are no different. Startups are a cold plunge every single day for years on end that don't end. So take the hardest thing you've ever done, and then try to wake up and do it every single day at 100%. Most people quit SEAL training, not during training, but in the morning at 4 a.m. when they have to come back and do it again after the night before. They're I don't want to do that again. And that's kind of most startups, I would say. It's in the beginning. So I think a lot of that grit really carries you through in kind of everything you do.
I can't wait to read your book. I don't know when it's coming out, but let's turn our attention to Lightning.ai. And how are you looking to disrupt? What problem were you looking to solve in the market?
Yeah, so initially Lightning.ai came from an open source project that I built called PyTorch Lightning. So PyTorch Lightning became kind of the center of how all the most companies in the world train models at scale.
Yeah.
So for example, Stable Diffusion from Stability AI was trained on PyTorch Lightning. So and that kind of ignited the Gen AI wave, right? NVIDIA has all their models called NeMo trained on Lightning. LinkedIn, for example, trained 100 billion parameter LLM recently on Lightning. So these are things that power the newsfeed, for example. So we're kind of like the core engine at the bottom that makes these models happen from like a process perspective. So we found ourselves in the middle of Gen AI, and the biggest problem that we saw was how do enterprises figure out how to get this stuff into production, like for real, beyond demos, right? And so we built a whole company and a platform around that, and we call that the last mile challenge, right? So if I'm a big bank, like a leading bank, I'll usually have a machine learning team that can build these systems. But there's like, I don't know, a few thousand machine learning people in the world, and there are millions of developers. So not everyone has these experts. So we basically give you the out-of-the-box solutions that you can just kind of run, hit deploy, and it's behind an API, and now you can plug it into your systems without knowing anything about AI. It's kind of like driving a car without being a physicist. Like you wouldn't learn physics to drive a car today.
No, I am not capable of science,
Right.
like you as a young man with math. Okay, so how do our viewers find out more? How can they take a test drive?
Yeah, so you go to Lightning.ai, and you go, there's on the top left, there's an AI hub. You click on that, and you'll see a bunch of enterprise AI applications. You can run them. You can play with it. You can see what it's like. But ultimately, we're really looking for developers who are like, hey, I want to bring AI into my company, and I don't really know how. You go there, within 5 minutes, you have it privately in your own cloud, super secure, and you didn't have to go learn physics or become a PhD in AI to do that.
As a former waiter would say, that's one-stop shop for AI. William Falcon is the CEO of Lightning AI. Really interesting conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Appreciate it very much.